Greetings, fellow songwriters and seekers, and welcome back to Muse and Measure. If you haven't done so yet, please hit that subscribe button down below. Okay, I'm going to do a series on vulnerability. Ugh, cringe. Why is it cringeworthy? Because that is what we're always trying to avoid all the time, is being vulnerable. We put up this stone wall, this stoic self, and we pretend like everything's cool, everything's fine. Maybe because if we really allowed ourselves to feel everything, then we'd just be a mess all the time. So obviously you need some kind of toughness, some stoicism, especially if you live where I live, which is New York City. But it's true everywhere. I mean, life is hard. But I want to do this series on vulnerability because I think it's really, really important as writers, as songwriters, as musicians, to be able to tap into it and to learn how to use it and how to be skillful about it and not, do what we see at open mics, which is this outpouring of people reading their diaries. That's not what I mean by vulnerability. Because as we've seen, if we go to these events, oftentimes it's not that effective. It's just kind of embarrassing, maybe a little too much information. But there is this paradox, which is at the heart of this, which is the more vulnerable, raw, honest a person is about what's really going on with them, what they're really feeling, what the specifics are, the sensory experiences they're having, the more specific they are, the more somehow universal it is at the same time, which doesn't make any sense because you think the more I'm talking about my own life and the specifics and particulars of my own life, you think less and less people would be able to relate to it. So that's really at the heart of this issue, and I want to really explore this a little bit. So a question I have is, why is it the songs that are born out of heartbreak, grief, doubt, the things that we try to keep hidden so much and we don't want to show to other people, that are our own private lives that we're living, our own private lives of suffering and anguish that we try to keep from our family and friends? Why is it that songs that are about that are the most memorable and the most long-lasting? Well, I think, at least my theory, my working theory for this series, and we'll see how it plays out because I'm hoping to learn something through just talking about this and going through the process and listening to a whole bunch of different examples and talking about techniques of working with this. What I really want to find out is why that is and how we can use our own vulnerability to help us be stronger and also to be better at communicating and being universal in our expression of emotions, to make us better songwriters, but also just to make us better people and make us more open to life and to the world, to our own experiences and to other people so we don't shut down constantly. I mean, that's really what we want for ourselves. And it's really, really hard, especially for men, because men from a very young age are trained and taught and discouraged to feel any emotion. And if you do feel it, you're not supposed to express it. You're supposed to have that stiff upper lip. You're supposed to be stoic. You're supposed to be tough. You don't want to be a crybaby. And there's been a lot of studies about this. I forget the title of the book. Once I remember it, I'll put it down in the links down below. But there's a great study of this about how boys are treated very differently from a young age by their parents, by their teachers, even the facial expressions, the subtle cues that humans give off, also the tone of voice, very, very differently than girls, whose emotions are welcomed, comforted. And this has a lasting detrimental effect for boys as they become men. And we see this in our society. Men have a lot more trouble in relationships relating to people, communicating what they're feeling. They have rage because when you can't deal with your emotions directly and you're not good at communicating your emotions, things just build up until you can't keep it in anymore. I know I've dealt with these issues in my life and my relationships. So I hope we get to a better place in our society figuring this out. Obviously, you can't just go through the world just being an emotional wreck all the time and overreacting emotionally to everything, but there's got to be some kind of healthy balance there. That's another thing to look at. How do we deal with this as a culture and a society? And how do we deal with it in our own songwriting process and our own spiritual path? So what is it about rawness and vulnerability that makes for such great songs and makes for such great emotional catharsis and connectivity and communication. Well, I was reminded of a Allen Ginsberg quote where he talks about nakedness. And he said, if you're willing to be naked, then others can recognize themselves in you. Very interesting. So what does he mean by nakedness then? There's a funny story, and I really should know her name, but I know she was married to Lionel Trilling, the famous literary critic. Anyway, she went to one of Allen Ginsberg's readings where he was reading with his partner, Peter Orlovsky, I believe. And at the end of the reading, when there was a Q&A, she raised her hand and said, what do you mean by nakedness? And then Allen Ginsberg promptly just took off all of his clothes and stood there naked, and so did his partner. So it was a very direct, literal thing. But I think the point that he was trying to make was not necessarily the literal nakedness. There's something to that, obviously, but human beings, as in their most vulnerable, naked selves, are very, very relatable. That we're all, we're not putting on any fake qualities. We're not pretending to be something we're not. When you're naked, you just are who you are. You can't help it. People see who you really are. There's no pretending. It doesn't matter how expensive your clothes are that you took off. Nakedness is very honest. Well, what does that mean? Obviously, I'm not advocating for you to just be naked for all your albums, though many people have done it. There's that great story about the Bangles lead singer singing Eternal Flame, but she was tricked into it. Anyways, I'm digressing. There's another quote, I think, where he explains it in a way that we can relate to a little bit more as writers and performers. You say what you think, what you feel, as honestly as you can, and that's your art. It's a kind of nakedness that's hard to achieve because we're trained to conceal ourselves. Okay? So you say what exactly you're thinking. You're not trying to sugarcoat it. You're not trying to put on little hoity-toity, educated, learned metaphors on top of it to make yourself look smart. What do you really think? Maybe it is something really smart and really intellectual. Then say it. What do you feel? Don't try to codify it in any kind of special way. Don't try to beat around the bush. Tell exactly what you feel and to be honestly about it as you can. That's, I think, what his point is. And I know this is very, very hard because, we, as I said before, we're trained to really keep all this in and to protect ourselves and protect the world from our emotional states. And we don't want to be honest. And, people who do keep diaries, they usually keep them a secret. They don't share them with everybody else. Maybe they're afraid of what other people are going to think. So, if you do this, then you're going to be very effective. And this has really been true about, all the great artists throughout time. The ones that really stand out, they may not even be technically good. They're definitely not the best at their instruments. They may not be the best singers in the world. So why is it that they're the biggest legends of all time, and the people look up to them, and they're our idols, and we strive to be like them, when they're obviously very flawed and they're not perfect musicians in any stretch of the imagination? It's because they have tapped into this emotional connectivity, and they feel very raw and authentic, and we feel something from them when we listen to their music. And that's really something very special. And, it's very, very hard to get to that level of vulnerability. And some may say that these artists are just hucksters and they're just, they're good con men and they pretend like they are going through this. They put on the pathos for us and they're good actors, and so we fall for it. And they're not really going through that stuff. And that might be the case. But if that's the case, then they are really, really good at that. As far as concealing it, I know from my own personal experience, I've had, struggles with this. Whenever I've written about, something that was really going on in my life, and I put it into a song, I was always very leery, like, I don't know if I want to share that with the world. And there are times when you don't want to share with the world. It's too much. I know I've had times in my songwriting life where I've written songs where it was just like, wow, this is very raw, very vulnerable, and this would be really embarrassing to release to the world. I'm writing about stuff that I'm really going through, and I'm not sharing it with my friends and family, so they're going to be kind of shocked when they hear this song that this is what I've been going through. I have this song called Born to Cry, when I was really feeling very, very depressed, and thinking about how death was everywhere. I was really obsessed with death at this time in my life, and just feeling on one hand that everything was meaningless because it all ended in death, but in another it was feeling just very precious to me, especially new life and babies and just the preciousness of the time I had with people. My mother had just died, and so I was really feeling she died all of a sudden, and it was a shock. It wasn't a gradual thing, and nobody knew it was coming. And just that shock, that something that you just take for granted that it's going to be there for at least a long time, that you have time, all of a sudden that time is ripped away from you. So I wrote this song called Born to Cry about that. And for a long time I was not ever planning on releasing it, just because I was like, this is too vulnerable. Not that I thought that, I just felt embarrassed by it. And just like, okay, yeah, I can't play this for my friends and family. But I did end up releasing it. I'm glad. And it's been kind of my rule ever since that if I'm not a little bit embarrassed by a song, then I'm probably just kind of going through the motions, or I'm showing off, or I'm trying to be too protective of myself, and I'm not being vulnerable enough. You can go the complete opposite way, where you are just spilling your guts, and that's not very effective either. And we don't need to know every single detail of your life. But there's got to be some level of vulnerability there. So why is it that human beings are so susceptible to this? That, when people are being raw and vulnerable and honest and real, why is it that we are so susceptible to this? Well, I think it's because, we evolved over time to be very social animals. We're very, very sensitive to people's body language, facial expressions, tone of voice. And we really developed that sensitivity, and we developed the facial ability and these eyebrows to be able to communicate different states. We developed a language that has different tonal levels so that we can express our emotions through them. And our body language as well is part of all of this. We also have mirror neurons, where just watching something, what's going on in your brain is very similar to what actually doing the thing that we're watching. So we can be compassionate, empathetic, but also just like by watching something, it's almost like it's happening to us. Another thing that we have as human beings is a bullshit meter. We can detect when somebody's faking it because maybe the body language is off, the facial expressions are off, something about the tone of the voice. So even when you're listening to a recording where you're not seeing the facial expressions, not seeing the body language, you can pick up when somebody's being truly authentic, or when they're just faking it, they're not feeling it themselves. That's why my friend Falu said you've got to feel it 200% for the audience to feel it 100 or feel it 10%. So when an artist can break through the bullshit and really speak honestly, they are doing something that's very, very powerful. And it's extremely hard to do at times, which is also kind of paradoxical because we have all these things going on, but we're really fighting against that conceptual self, that status quo, the ego. We're fighting against all that to allow this vulnerability to come out and to let the ego let its guard down and be truly naked. And once you can do that, that's just so incredibly powerful. And we often feel like the vulnerability is weakness, that being, letting our guard down is weakness, but it's really the most courageous thing you can do is to be truly vulnerable and honest and tell exactly what's going on with you and what you're feeling. Takes incredible strength and courage to do that. That's why it's so hard to do. All right, so let's ground a couple of these ideas in musical examples. When I think of great artists who are able to be raw and vulnerable and really kind of tell the truth about what they're going through, I immediately think of Elliott Smith. And I can't listen to his music that much because it's so emotionally intense for me. Take a song like Between the Bars. You have this, what sounds like this waify boy who's like in the next room, and you're listening through the walls, and it almost feels like I shouldn't be doing this. I'm kind of embarrassed. He's being so honest and raw and vulnerable, almost like he's hidden off in a little room in the only place where he can really express what he's feeling. And he does it with these, incredibly moving chords, and the music's incredible. The lyrics just are so direct and honest and vulnerable. And most of the time, music will save the day. It kind of, we use music to balance out, maybe to temper the extreme lyrics. But you hear the music and the content of the song kind of at battle, and music's constantly trying to shift things on the song for us. Switching from major to minor, switching, moving chromatically on the bass line, trying to wriggle its way out of this all-enveloping depression, which is so weighty in the song. And usually music can win out, either through its beauty or that it hits something sublime, so we get this new perspective on the situation. But especially a song like Between the Bars, it's questionable whether music wins there. I feel like it doesn't. It doesn't actually get us out from that. That the power of the emotion and the rawness and the extreme suffering that he's going through, it's gorgeous how it grapples with the chords and how they are kind of working around each other. The chords and the music are kind of trying to get out of it, from under it, and lift us up a little bit, which is the beauty of the song. And I guess if you don't listen to the lyrics and you don't pay attention to how he's singing it, maybe you can get that. But I feel like the music gets defeated in the end, and what we're left with is the intense, raw emotion still. There's no saving this Elliott Smith situation, which I think that's why, if music was your gift and it was your way out of extreme suffering, but your extreme suffering always won over the music, well, you can see why, someone might have done what he did, which is very, very sad and a huge loss to the world. But if you want to learn about singing from raw, honest, direct, personal experience from a great master, listen to Elliott Smith. Just do it when you're okay emotionally, and don't get drowned in that in those dark waters. So speaking of water, another example is Joni Mitchell's song "River." That whole album, Blue, is just a masterpiece from start to finish. And it's a great lesson on how to balance vulnerability with artistic and aesthetic aims. Because unlike Elliott Smith, who is absolutely brilliant in my book, I don't mean to cast aspersions on him at all. In Joni Mitchell, the music saves us from the doldrums. It saves us from that deep depression. Whereas in Elliott Smith, maybe what he's singing about and the way he's performing it is just the music can't wriggle its way out, even though you shift the chord from major to minor and minor to major and move the bass lines around and kind of constantly shifting things, that the music is still subdued and ends up serving the depression and the sadness. In Joni Mitchell, it's like you have those contrasting polarities of sadness with the joyousness and the brilliance of creativity and newness in the world. And that song River is a great example. It starts out with a little quote from Jingle Bells, for God's sakes. Talk about happiness and joy. And then she sings songs about how she really screwed up and how, she is to fall for the downfall of her relationships in some ways. I'm so hard to handle, I'm selfish and I'm sad. Self-accusing. But the music is so beautiful. Her voice is angelic. The chord progressions are absolutely brilliant. The melodies are transcendent. And so that is a great model for this. So you can see here that vulnerability is something that we want to incorporate in our music, but we also have to be craftspeople, and we have to bring in these other elements that are going to offer a way out. So we want the catharsis, but we also want the transcendence to get out of these things. And, you can express this vulnerability in other ways besides just the lyrics. You can do it, by, instead of just trying to get the most polished, perfect take, you can incorporate, allow for moments where your voice cracks a little bit, or you kind of, something happens in your voice and your performance, maybe you make a mistake or you flub something, but in a way that it draws out emotion. So if you are given those gifts in any of their performances, you shouldn't get rid of them. You should definitely highlight them and use them. One example of that is Johnny Cash. At the very end of his life, I think June Carter had even died, and he's covering that song Hurt. And you hear it in his performance there, that it's definitely not a perfect performance as far as hitting all the notes and being perfectly in pitch and getting your phrasing right. But man, that song kills as far as getting that emotion across. You can really hear his vulnerability, and you can hear his hurt there. And it's amazing that he didn't write that song, because it sounds like he did. So what is my point? I think what I'm getting to is that we should incorporate vulnerability as much as possible. We should try to be as authentic and really be honest about what's really going on with us in the moment. And this doesn't mean that we have to be in some kind of horrible emotional state where we've just broken up with somebody, or contemplating mortality, or, any kind of depressive state. You could be singing about joy. Whatever state you're in, as long as you're being authentic and real about it, that's going to come across. And this is really the X factor that separates, the artists that are truly successful with everybody else, who's just kind of trying to replicate what was going on before, just kind of copying what happened before, just using the same chord progressions, use the same tired metaphors and cliches. You look at the music industry, and there's tons of artists like this. And yes, they're successful for a while, but the ones that stand out are the ones that can really connect with us emotionally and be really vulnerable. And we really feel an authentic connection to what they're saying. Now, as I said before, they might not be the most technically gifted musician, but we don't care. We don't care that they don't hit the notes perfectly in pitch, when they're giving us permission and showing us the way to feel something, that we need to actually go into another room when we listen to their music, because we might tear up, and we don't want to listen to it in front of people we're not comfortable around. That's a sign of a really great artist. And now that AI and algorithms are driving so much of the content in the world right now, we can really point to what is truly human that AI has not been able to, and may never be able to get onto, which is the truly human. So maybe a crack in the voice, a trembling, a moment of uncertainty in the voice or in your lyrics. AI has not been able to capture that aspect of being a human being yet. And I'm not sure that it ever will. I think our bullshit meter will always be there to be able to detect this is not real. And I know that people can do this with videos and images now. You can just, even if something looks totally real, there's something in it which is uncanny that says that's not authentic. Now, that's true of AI, but it's also true in subtler cases where just somebody's, just writing a song to have a hit, or they're just writing a song just because, they're doing some kind of exercise and just trying to get one out. They're not really singing about anything that's going on in their life. So at some point, you have to let your real voice come through and stop performing and just start revealing. Just say, this is what's happening right now. It's one of my old teachers at Naropa, Bobby Louise Hawkins, great performer, great writer, and just brilliant at connecting with audiences emotionally. Just said, this is happening now, was her phrase. That's what the prompt was. You don't need any kind of fancy other prompt or, go and get an MFA in writing. That's your prompt. What is happening to you right now? Now, some other case studies of artists that have done that very well. We think of Adele's Someone Like You. They recorded a demo of it right when she was going through the breakup that she was singing about. And then later on, they re-recorded everything, thinking, we need to do a polished version. But they realized they should go back to the original demo version of the vocals and use those, because there was something special about that, because she was still feeling that raw emotion, which the later versions didn't have. And I've definitely experienced this with my own recording. I have a song called Got to Know You Too Well. And I tried re-recording the vocals many, many times, but there was something special about the demo version where I was able to tap into what I was really feeling when I wrote that song and the emotional aspects of it. And so I went back and used the vocal from the demo when I did the official release. Another artist along the lines of Joni Mitchell who can balance the rawness and the vulnerability with just incredible artistic, dazzling, beautiful poetic lines and gorgeous music is Sufjan Stevens. And one example would be his 4th of July, where he really is sweet with his poetic turns and phrases, his metaphors, his images. And the sweetness invites us in, and before we know it, we are along with him on the ride, and we don't realize that this song's about mourning and about processing the death of someone. And boy, what a shift. But we're with him, and so we are given permission to feel this with him, because he's revealing it as it probably happened to him, which is you're going along in your life with this person, and you have this sweetness, this intimacy with them, and then all of a sudden they're gone. And that sweetness remains. But what is new is this sense of mourning and loss. So that's an add-on, an addition, an addendum to the original rawness of that relationship, and gives it kind of this universal meaning. So some of the lyrics, the evil it spread like a fever ahead. It was night when you died, my firefly. What could have I said to raise you from the dead? Oh, could I be the sky on the 4th of July? Well, you do enough talk, my little hawk. Why do you cry? Tell me, what did you learn from the Tillamook burn or the 4th of July? We're all going to die. Absolutely beautiful lyrics. I mean, it's incredible how powerful you can be with this rawness and sweetness and direct expression, like you're talking to some sweet little secret friend through the lyrics, who is now in some other place. Another great person who is really effective at leaving in all the cracks and bruises and wrinkles in her music so that we can really feel the kind of gut-wrenching experience and pain that she goes through is Lucinda Williams. Listen to the song Essence. And if you didn't understand what she was saying, you spoke a different language, you would still get the feeling of, incredible emotional pathos that she is expressing through that song. Take a listen to it and you'll hear what I mean. I mean, she's a great master of including all those little things and not being this polished, perfect singer. She's an incredible singer, but doing it in a way that still keeps that rawness, that dirt is still in there. So with all these songs, I made a Spotify playlist. If you'd like to listen to all these song examples, I have there. But I want to go over some takeaways from this, and we're going to flesh these out in the upcoming videos. I hope you're ready to be vulnerable through this, or at least watch me be vulnerable. But I think that this hard work is really, really important for us to turn the page and to take the next step in our songwriting and to get closer to what we're aiming at, which is this kind of universal human experience of joy and the bliss and the transcendence of life, coupled with the extreme sadness and suffering that is part of being a human being too. That's all part of life. And to be fully human, to be fully alive, is to experience both of those and the contrary, paradoxical nature of life in relation to those two truths. Because life is absolutely wonderful, full of bliss, full of wonder, full of joy, but it's also full of heartbreak and anguish and sadness. And they're not necessarily opposing emotions when you get down to the feeling you get from both of them. And one often leads to the other. And both can be really, really powerful experiences and bring us closer to a sense of being truly present and truly being alive. So enough of the philosophical aspect of it. Let's talk about where the rubber meets the road here, to use a cliche, because we're dealing with those too. Here's a few little tips that will at least maybe food for thought and to think about your writing process. Write the thing you don't want to say, the thing that you will not say out loud. Write it down and make that the heart of your song. So what is it you really want to say to your wife or girlfriend or boyfriend that's bothering you right now? What is the direct thing that you want to say? Or to somebody who's died? Or to your boss? Or whatever situation. What is the thing that you really, really want to say? Or maybe just somebody who just pissed you off out on the street that you probably wisely held back and didn't say out loud. But that's the incredible thing about the playground of the arts and the imagination, is you can live out these potential situations in your head, and you can always be the hero of your own story. So write that out, write what you don't want to say and make that the center of your song. You should record a demo, and I do this throughout the whole songwriting process. You should be recording yourself doing the song and trying not to polish it too much. Polishing will come later, but what you're trying to get to is what is the truth, the raw emotional state of this song. And those often come out in the early demos. And try not to polish it up too much. Just record yourself directly, tapping into that emotion before you've forgotten it. And remind yourself before you record it, what feeling am I trying to express here? What am I going through, or what was I going through when I wrote these lyrics? And bring that out in your voice. Don't mistake vulnerability for oversharing. You don't have to put in every nitty-gritty detail and every stupid thing that the other person said, or any bodily functions or anything like that. You don't need to put all of that. That's all oversharing. So we'll get into that in later videos, but there is a line. So you still want to be artistic about it, and you still want to root things in the five senses, but you don't have to overshare and put things out. And there's some great masters of this, and I'll give you some future examples in upcoming episodes about where people clearly demarcated, this is the private, this is the public. So a lot of times people equate like being vulnerable and raw with sharing every single bloody detail. And that's not the case, because then people can get hooked up on that, and then maybe it becomes too particular. So don't do that. Vulnerability is a craft, and it takes discipline to stay raw, and it takes exertion to stay raw, because your ego is going to creep in, your editor is going to creep in. So it's really good when you're feeling intense emotion. That's a gift, and use it. So whenever I'm really pissed off or really upset or really sad, and I can pull myself out for enough space to say, recognize the state I'm in is in an unusually volatile state, I will know, oh, the only thing that's going to make me feel any better right now is to express this, and this is a great opportunity for song. And whenever I've done this, I've been really happy with the songs that I've come up with. So this horrible thing that's happening to you can actually be a gift to you as a writer and songwriter. So use it if you can remind yourself to do it. All right, just to recap, the paradox that we started with, I just want to reframe it now that we've had some experience here with vulnerability, is that the thing that could really make our song the most unforgettable and reach the most people and become a universal connection based on emotion is often what we are by instinct trying to block and try to subdue. So being vulnerable is really not second nature to us, which it should be, but it is something that we have to use a lot of exertion and skill to kind of tease out. This is why I really like to write when I'm in an emotionally vulnerable state and I'm feeling it so intensely that I can't subdue it. And I can't be too crafty and too clever, that I just have to get it out. When I can write in that state, that's wonderful. And then the rest of the time, getting to that state is much, much harder. And so you have to use the craft and the skill to really investigate your own lyrics, to investigate your chords, to investigate the melody you're doing, and ask yourself, is this leading towards a vulnerable state, or is this just being clever and kind of doing that more subduing, egotistical, backing away, like, oh, I've got to put my best foot forward here. I've got to, dress this up so that it looks good, looks like I got things under control, looks like I'm a skilled, brilliant musician and a masterful songwriter. Watch out for that. That is what's going to block that really good emotional connection. All right. Well, if any of this resonated with you, I'd love to hear about your personal stories about vulnerability and how you were able to write something that connected with this raw truth in your own songs. If you have examples of your own songs, please put a link to them in the comments as well. You obviously don't need to share your whole diary entries around this, but you can just say, this is something that I went through, and this is a song that I wrote, or any experiences that you've had with vulnerability. I would love to hear about those, so please put those in the comments. All right, there's going to be some more videos about this topic. I hope it's not too cumbersome or too uncomfortable for you. It's uncomfortable for me, but that's when you know that you are doing the right work, is when you are feeling slightly embarrassed and slightly uncomfortable. Well, I look forward to being uncomfortable and embarrassed with you in the upcoming episodes so that we can transcend this stifling ego, which is always trying to make it look like we've got our shit together, when most of the time we don't. All right. Well, best of luck with your songwriting and spiritual practice. Until next time, take care.